largest organism in the world is a mushroom that covers 2,200 acres in Malo National Forest in eastern Oregon. This mushroom sits at the foundation of the forest, acting as a companion plant to numerous 100-foot-tall trees. The mushroom assists with the uptake of nutrients and the assimilation of raw ingredients. The forest that sits on top of the mushroom is successful because of the mushroom's assistance. When scientists were doing research on Earth's largest organism, they discovered that several times throughout its life, this particular mushroom would emit a deadly form of itself and spread throughout the entire forest. This poison would eventually kill off all the trees and decimate the forest. Eventually, the trees grow back and the forest returns, but every time it does, the trees grow taller and wider and the boundaries of the forest expand. By destroying the old to be used as fertilizer for the new, this mushroom essentially acts as a caretaker for the forest, managing the give and take between the limitations of the earth and the potentials of the forest. In more ways than one, our collective consciousness is like this giant mushroom. It feeds the impetus we have to create and acts as the creator or the caretaker and destroyer of our social creations. And it does this so that it may continually recreate itself on the crest of human innovation, cooperation, and freedom. With consciousness at its foundation, humanity has been creating social institutions for far longer than this 2,000-year-old mushroom. Social institutions began as a means to gain control over a seemingly chaotic world. We organized ourselves into groups for protection and sustainability, and to reach new potentials that we couldn't reach on our own. In some places, these groups eventually broke down and made way for something else, something greater, that could reach higher and sustain longer. Over the course of our recorded history, we see ourselves go from living within small bands of family to rural communities focused around the access to community resources, to small towns and cities, to booming metropolises and enormous nation-states, until we finally find ourselves in our present-day global internet-connected network. At each stage, we learn from the old, and we even use pieces of the old to build off of to make way for something new. Similar to the mushroom, we have undergone this process several times in our history, as the methods of power and control adapt along with our consciousness learning to express its desires. The rule of God kings became the rule of kings and queens and their armies. Sometimes their rule would shift to other forms of power structure, like democracy, fascism, communism, socialism. Some of these places were again destroyed or co-opted, only to see in their place new forms of control, like corporate plutocracy and wage slavery. And just like the mushroom, we as a collective group emit a poisonous part of ourselves, something from our psyche that comes out in human interactions, causing the inevitable and eventual collapse of any social structure or institution it seeps its way into. We can all recognize this poison as the lust for power. And just like the mushroom whose poison allows the forest to regenerate to new heights and new growth, our lust for power and control always destroys the collective institution. By giving us the headspace to organize what it is we like about the current status quo and what it is we can improve on, the lust for power is the catalyst that creates the desire to make something better, which in the end becomes the basis for any social change. This process allows us to reassess our situation and attempt to make something better and to go further than we have ever gone before. For example, monarchies and the influence of Native American nations gave way to our modern-day republic. The First World War led to the League of Nations. The Second World War led to the UN. Slavery eventually gave way to the Civil Rights Movement, and the oppressive force of the Industrial Revolution eventually made way for the 8-hour day and workers' rights. And someday, we'll move beyond those things to something better, to something greater. And today we stand at this point in our history at a cusp, where we as a whole have seen our poison within us do its work, and we are ready for the systems of control to again change appearance. The only question we face at this cusp is the same one we face every time we allow the power to change hands, and that is, will we allow those in power to just change and adapt the way they oppress us? Or are we finally ready to drop the shackles we carry to embrace the equality of all our brothers and sisters, and recognize that we have a fundamental right over the control of our lives, communities, and freedoms, and that no one has the right to control their fellow human. We must take this time to regenerate ourselves, to make something we've all dreamed of, a more harmonious and just world for everyone involved.